am extremely excited and very privileged that I now have the opportunity of introducing our next speaker. I'm Ginny Funk with the Alzheimer's Association, and I get to introduce Dr. Carl Hill. Dr. Carl Hill is Vice President of Scientific Engagement at the Alzheimer's Association, and he oversees the strategic efforts to create global awareness of the association's international research program. What that means is he leads an outreach to a network of staff, volunteers, donors to our more than 75 chapters across the United States in order to really grow the understanding of the Alzheimer's Association's role in accelerating research and sharing scientific updates. And he disseminates knowledge of our organization's research programs at key events, works cross-functionally to build programs related to public health, and also the engagement of physicians and other healthcare groups. Prior to joining the Alzheimer's Association, Dr. Hill served as director of the Office of Special Populations at the National Institute on Aging, NIA. In his 6 years at the NIA, he led the development of the Health Disparities Research Framework, which stimulates studies focused on health disparities related to aging. Dr. Hill also directed the Butler Williams Scholars Program, which provides yearly training for early career investigators interested in aging research. Dr. Hill earned his PhD from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where he trained with the Center for Research on Ethnicity, Culture, and Health, and the Program for Research on Black Americans. He is an alumni of the National Medical Fellowship, W.K. Kellogg Foundation Health Policy Fellowship Program. He holds a master's degree in public health from Morehouse School of Medicine and received its Distinguished Alumni Award in 2019. As a member of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Public Health Prevention Service, a training and leadership program, he helped to establish the Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare at Tuskegee University. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Dr. Hill, for joining us today. And we really appreciate your time, especially on a Saturday. We are very blessed to have you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for reading that long bio. But most of all, I think, you know, in addition to all of that, I'm just so happy and thrilled and pleased to be here with all of you. Thanks for all of our participants for taking the time on a Saturday to hear this excellent information. So thanks, Jenny and Dianne and Byron and Greg and everyone there in the chapter that is doing, I think, the heroic work of providing resources and support to families and communities who are dealing with this devastating disease. So thanks for all that you do. I'm thrilled to be here. I will share my my screen here. I think it was Greg who made the statement, you know, that in our new virtual world, we've got to be a little flexible. And so we will do that. So I'm sharing here and I will go to my PowerPoint. All right, so Jenny, can everyone see that title slide? Is that good? All right, well, yeah, like, as I mentioned, just really excited and thrilled and had a chance to participate in and hear some of the excellent presentations this morning. And I tell you, Dr. Weiss, you know, really stole a lot of my thunder in a good way because he gave a really nice talk around, you know, some of the exciting and hopeful research that we have going, and certainly hear that from a clinician's perspective is powerful. So he's a great example, I think, of healthcare providers that are really committed to this work. And I learned a lot from hearing that presentation. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about diversity and how it's an important frontier in Alzheimer's research, and maybe cover some of the concepts that Dr. Weiss covered and add just a little bit of context to some of those. So we'll do that. In our time today, I'll give a high level landscape of what I think is important Alzheimer's and dementia research. Highlights, I think, in the early detection and diagnosis field, the latest advances in clinical trials and lifestyle interventions, and then, probably very importantly to my colleagues there, in the chapter in Texas, how you all can continue to stay involved. So that's a general kind of a roadmap for what we'll do today. I couldn't start without telling you about the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which was held, as Dr. Weiss mentioned, just last week, and it was just tremendous. He mentioned that we were in Amsterdam. We hoped to be in Amsterdam, I tell you, but with the COVID pandemic, we were forced to make this a virtual online conference, and I tell you, our participants made the most of the opportunity to join with us. So we made it free to all that were interested, and over 33,000 people attended at least one, or they sat in on some sessions of that conference, and 163 countries represented. So that really speaks to this concept of diversity that I will go over, and this makes this the largest forum in the world to advance dementia science. So throughout the presentation, I'll touch on some important presentations and talks that were shared during last week's AAIC, but it was just a tremendous, I think, opportunity to hear from the scientific community and to have a diverse group of participants, who would otherwise maybe couldn't make it to Amsterdam, or maybe couldn't sometimes the conferences that I just can't afford, but making it free and virtual was an opportunity to touch as many people that were interested. And I thought it was a tremendous success, led by our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Maria Carrillo. So just kudos to the Alzheimer's Association and the scientific community. So I'll start out by just saying, hey, I go to the dictionary. Diversity to me means composed of distinct elements and showing a great deal of variety. That's right out of the dictionary, and I think that is a fundamental part of everything that we're doing. Dr. Weiss mentioned a little bit of the number of combination treatments, or the ways that we're thinking about this. I mentioned AAIC just a minute ago, and how many countries were developed that were represented. Just many different elements and qualities, and I think diversity. Thinking about diversity is a fundamental part of everything that we do in Alzheimer's and other dementia research. And when you think about the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, we know that there are three. There's beta amyloid, tau, and neurodegeneration. Those are the three hallmarks of the disease that really showcase the plaques and tangles that have come to represent the biological aspect of Alzheimer's disease. And we look right here in the beginning, we know that Dr. Alois Alzheimer's led a team of scientists that included the first African-American psychiatrist in this country, Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller, who was on his team. And so Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller was probably one of the earliest African-Americans to earn a medical degree from Boston University in 1897. And because of the context of the time, racial discrimination at the time, he could only perform autopsies, with his work. And so Dr. Alzheimer's, who was working in Germany, noticed and heard about this African-American doctor who was doing research on cadavers and doing autopsies, and he recruited him to his lab. And together, they were able to come up with what we know now are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So, our field from the very beginning has had a commitment to diversity and inclusion. These are champions, I think, of a diverse effort. Dr. Alois Alzheimer's and Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller. And so I would say that this defines, this concept of diversity defines everything we do, and it was present from the very beginning of research that is looking to explore this disease. And then also, the idea that processes that were taking place in the brain could impact behavior, that was quite novel at that time, right? So we've come to understand that things that happen in the body impact behavior. That's kind of common knowledge now for those of us in public health science. But at the time, that was novel, right? So our research field also has been from the very beginning accepting of new and innovative ideas, new and innovative, diverse ideas. And all this, I think, stimulates from the origins of this research enterprise. So I'm very excited and spirited because I know how we began, and I know how that is going to influence all of the important and exciting research that we have underway. And so, as Jenny mentioned, I spent about 6 years with the National Institute on Aging, which is a part of the federal government. It's a part of the National Institutes of Health. So I've been in this role for about a year, and I have just been, I tell you, I've been excited and inspired by the work of my colleagues at the home office and the chapters all around the country to really think about and understand advancing care and support and research across the world to combat this devastating illness. And so I had a chance to learn from a colleague of mine, Dr. Keith Fargo, who's on the MedSci team, that our symbol here includes a Florence flask, which represents science, and how science must translate into really understanding Alzheimer's in the brains of people who are affected, and understanding how that research can really improve the well-being and the lives of those that are suffering from Alzheimer's or other dementias. So this is really important because I think that we must always understand that research, while it lands in high-impact journals and we have great meetings with the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, our goal is to make sure that research translates to people and public health. And I think that is signified by the emblem that we wear and that represents the Alzheimer's Association. So just some level setting. I know Dr. Weiss went over this, but dementia is a collection of symptoms related to cognitive decline. It could include, as I mentioned, a diverse set of symptoms that are cognitive, behavioral, or psychological. It's due to biological changes in the brain. And I think that's important to note, given some of the early work that we see. But Alzheimer's is the most common cause, and mixed dementia is prevalent. So there's vascular dementia, Lewy bodies dementia, frontal temporal dementia, but Alzheimer's dementia is the most common cause, and that's why we really hone in our focus on Alzheimer's disease. Because I think the work of caregivers is really the heroic work. We have to start with those therapies and treatments that are FDA approved for improving the life, the well-being of those that are affected and suffering from Alzheimer's right now today. And so, there are a few of those available. You can read those on the left, but currently there are no therapies that can cure Alzheimer's. Some drugs are available to temporarily improve symptoms, but the research field is making great progress in developing new and better therapies. As I mentioned, some of the therapies are targeting agitation, aggression, sleep disturbances. Caregivers here that are participating who are doing this great work know how important it is to make sure that our loved ones that are affected by Alzheimer's are able to live the best quality of life possible. So psychosis, apathy, all kinds of treatments are underway. We've got one, pimavanserin, which is looking to increase or affect psychosis. It includes dementia related to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body. It has the potential to be the first FDA-approved psychosis drug in the dementia-specific population. And that's just this summer, should be submitting to FDA for regulatory review. So that's well underway for review and potential hopeful, rigorous review by FDA. There's also new funding for individuals, that will take a look at severe and disruptive agitation and late stage Alzheimer's. So this is a phase 2 multi-center trial, which will enroll individuals living in memory and long-term care facilities. So this is funded by the Alzheimer's Association and the NIH. So again, just making the case to you that while we are, and I'll get to this in just a second, but while we are thinking of ways to, and treatments and therapies to totally eliminate Alzheimer's, what's priority is the work of caregivers and being sure that we have treatments that are available to increase the quality of life of those suffering from Alzheimer's or other dementias. And then there's also sleep. Medicine's focused on behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, insomnia. This is the first FDA-approved insomnia drug in the dementia population. So this is, I think, proof that supporting research and really looking to enhance treatments that can work right now, that can really influence the well-being of those that are affected, are on the priority list, and we continue to support and urge those treatments and medicines. Then there's aducanumab. So as I mentioned, many of these treatments are addressing the symptoms of Alzheimer's or another dementia, but there's no treatment that influences the underlying causes of the disease, the hallmarks of the disease, which I mentioned earlier, were amyloid beta, tau, and neurodegeneration. Well, we've got a treatment, a drug that's been in the pipeline, and just yesterday, I mean, this is just hot off the press. Just yesterday, the FDA announced that it would review this drug, aducanumab, which is an anti-amyloid antibody for treatment of dementia and mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease. So this begins the FDA's review process under priority review. So that was announced just yesterday, right? So the important thing to note here is that this is the first drug that has gone this far in over 10 years, right? So the previous treatments, drugs that I mentioned, they influence the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Well, this aducanumab from the company Biogen is looking to target amyloid in the brain, and it's under FDA priority review, and they announced that just yesterday. So I'm really excited to be able to share that information with you, and please keep a lookout for this aducanumab and Biogen, because we're hoping for a rigorous review, and very much importantly, if approved, we want to make sure that all people have access to this critical and very important treatment. So stay tuned and we all are going to stay tuned for a word from FDA about this treatment. But while FDA is looking to review this landmark, I think, treatment, we know that there's a real strong focus on risk reduction, right? And so those of us that may have Alzheimer's or another dementia in our family history, or we may have a certain risk factor for this, we've got to support and take a keen eye on research that focuses on risk reduction. So the Lancet International Commission on Dementia Prevention, Intervention, and Care in 2017 made a statement that 35% of global dementia may be preventable. And they identified initially 9 factors that they thought were really important over the life course. So in early age is education, so being sure that a number of years of education and quality of education is so important. In midlife, hypertension, obesity, hearing loss were identified by this commission as being very important for risk reduction. And then in late life, depression, diabetes, physical inactivity, smoking, and low social contact, right, were identified by this commission as being important risk factors for reducing risk for Alzheimer's. And then just last week during AAIC 2020, the Lancet Commission comes and they add 3 additional risk factors to this list which are exposure to air pollution, traumatic brain injury, and excess alcohol use in late life, right? So what we're seeing now is, again, this diverse perspective, thinking and certainly looking and hoping for a drug that might influence the amyloid in the brain, but also we've got commissions and researchers coming together to give us some information on risk factors and what we can do right now today, right, to reduce our risk. And so there are 12 risk factors that this commission, International Commission on Dementia Prevention, Intervention, and Care have come up with. And so you want to pay very close attention to those. And I think it links very well to some of the discussion that Russell Gaynor provided in terms of what we might call lifestyle perspective. So very, very important research going on here. And I think it's important because as Dr. Weiss mentioned, there's a continuum of cognitive impairment where mild cognitive impairment is a known risk factor for dementia. So everyone who experiences dementia passes through mild cognitive impairment, right? And so when you prevent new cases of mild cognitive impairment, you prevent new cases of dementia. So if we can, hone in on that risk reduction for those 12 risk factors, which I think are, there's going to be some real, community work, public health work, community-based participatory work that needs to take place. Because you think about a risk factor like air pollution, that's an environmental factor and people, many times don't even know about the quality of air and where they live. So we've got to really hone in our public health strategies, but it does give us, I think, a playbook for understanding how we can deliver effective interventions. And we know that along this continuum, we have a real opportunity for intervention. And just level setting here, we know Alzheimer's is not typical aging. While aging is a primary and important risk factor, we know that there are genetic factors that are at play. Dr. Weiss mentioned some of this, a family history of Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. I mentioned that with the commissions. Work, social and cognitive stimulation that links into low social contact, education, and traumatic brain injury. So there are real opportunities for us to reduce risk at earlier stages in the life course. And our work we're hopeful, we're excited because we have the opportunity to do just that. And we know all of this is important because more than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, right? 16 million. And again, I cannot overstate how much I respect and really congratulate caregivers who provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or other dementias. 1 in 3 seniors dies of Alzheimer's or another dementia. And Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. Dr. Weiss mentioned this. So this is a public health priority. In 2020, Alzheimer's or other dementias will cost the nation $305 billion, right? And by 2050, that could be as high as $1.1 trillion, right? So no matter the way you look at it, if you think of it from people that are affected or morbidity, mortality perspective or a health economics perspective, Alzheimer's or other dementias are a public health priority. And what we're seeing now is some of the best research that has ever taken place in this space, all right? And then we mentioned the diversity aspect of this. There is a disparities angle here that's very important. African Americans are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop the disease than white Americans. I'll tell you why I can only say 2 to 3 times a little later. Hispanic or Latinos are almost 2 times more likely to develop the disease than white Americans. So there are populations in the U.S. Society that are disproportionately affected, right? And so if you're trained in the way I'm trained, in the way that Ginny mentioned, you want to understand what are some of the reasons why these populations are disproportionately affected, because that could influence the way that we provide care and treatment and support for everyone, right? So there are important disparities that exist in this space as well. I've been, again, in my 1 year since being a part of the Alzheimer's Association, I've just been thrilled in the way that the association connects researchers and advocates together, convenes meeting. I just mentioned the Alzheimer's Association International Conference. We had a whole meeting last year just on tau, right? And that's one of the 3 hallmarks of the disease. We brought together researchers who do nothing but tau research, right? So convening researchers to come together and to share their research is really important. We influence, and I'll talk about that a little more, and then we fund. We actually fund research. So so many strategic directions are here at play. In terms of influencing, I think about the advocacy work of the Alzheimer's Association. So if you look here at this graph, you see that in 2011, at the National Institutes of Health, the place I came from, there was $448 million allocated to Alzheimer's and related dementia research. Now, you say $448 million. That's a lot of money for my bank account. But when you think about research at the NIH and you compare that to maybe cancer research or cardiovascular disease research, and we don't want to get into disease wars here, but we know that the more funding, the more resources that you have in a particular area, the more ability you have to entice researchers over to this, to the Alzheimer's disease research space to conduct research, to use their labs to really try to handle and answer some of these tough questions in the dementia science space. And then you're able to recruit early career investigators to say, hey, I just finished my PhD. Hey, how can I'll commit my entire research career to Alzheimer's research. So when you see $448 million, that was just a morsel when compared to some of these other institutes like the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute or the National Cancer Institute. So since 2011, the great work, the advocacy work, and the influencing work of the Alzheimer's Association has taken that number to $2.8 billion in 2020 at the NIH, right? And so we certainly count the National Institutes of Health, specifically the National Institute on Aging, as a strong partner with all that we do. And the NIA, place where I came from, with that money, was really able to offer training to early PhDs, young PhDs, so they can work with some of these more established investigators. When I was there, we were able to use some of that funding to create the Health Disparities Research Framework that my office created. So I specifically, individually benefited from some of the work of the Alzheimer's Association. So this is just tremendous, and I think it gives us even more hope that the best researchers will be conducting the most rigorous research because we've got funding in the area, and we're hoping that in 2021, 2022, and beyond, that this level of support for this research will maintain and hopefully increase, right? And while we partner, very strongly with the National Institutes of Health and the National Institute on Aging, the Alzheimer's Association supports our own research. So we're the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's and all dementia research in the world, right? So right now, today, we have committed over $208 million to 590 projects in 31 countries around the world. Now, it's in partnership with what the NIH does, but what we can do a little differently because we're a nonprofit funder is support researchers all around the world, right? And again, we'll get back to that concept of diversity. There are great ideas in the United States. Hey, and we want to make sure that we support those. But there are a lot of great ideas that happen outside of the United States. And one that's come up a couple times today is the Fingers trial. And so there are researchers all over the world that are looking to answer these hard research questions. And we want to make sure that we can support them as well. So we're the largest nonprofit funder of this research in the world. And there's so much to gain from partnering with researchers from many different countries. But in this country, we know that our researchers in Texas have played such a tremendous role in what we've done thus far. Since 1996, we've made 96 awards to researchers in Texas 31 of them are currently active. Since '96, we've committed about $17 million to researchers in Texas. $7 million are active. When the gold standard for the scientific process is it can't be Carl and Jenny that review these applications that come in, because we might just select all of our friends to get the research award. So we want to bring in other reviewers, scientific reviewers who are experts in a particular area. And 186 expert researchers from Texas have worked with us to provide over 1,800 critiques of applications that come in. So the case that I'm making here is that we're all over the world, but in Texas, we partner with researchers tremendously to make our research enterprise continue to grow. I mentioned the AAIC. A part of AAIC is the International Society to Advance Alzheimer's Research and Treatment. So these are groups of researchers that focus on specific areas. I mentioned TAL a minute ago, or those that are really interested in non-pharmacological interventions or diversity and disparities. So we want to make sure that we bring these researchers together, because when you put these researchers in the room, they start debating over methods and they really get in on some of the key and critical details. And that's how the scientific enterprise continues to develop. We've got 126 iStart members who are living in Texas right now. So some of these funded researchers are from the Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, Baylor, University of Texas at San Antonio. We're all over Texas, and I don't think anything that we can do could really take place without collaboration and strong partnership with researchers right there in Texas. And there was some mention of COVID-19, and we're all dealing with COVID, and many basic science experiments and clinical trials have certainly been impacted because of concerns about social distancing for trial volunteers and laboratory staff. Hey, let's just face it, everyone's learning what the new normal will be and how to reduce risk, not only for Alzheimer's, but for COVID, right? And so you want to make sure that certain enterprises can continue, but the dementia community is committed to advancing these studies despite these challenges. We've given instructions to our researchers to, hey, if you're going to be home and you're isolating from a social perspective, make sure that you can work on some publications and maybe analyze data or prepare manuscripts. You can think about new ideas, or use the virtual platform that we have to have meetings and open doors to new opportunities around the globe. And we saw with AAIC last week, with over 33,000 people participating, that a real thirst for science is not waning because of COVID-19, and we're going to keep pushing and moving our science forward. There was some really interesting research presenting at AAIC around the flu and pneumonia vaccines that may be associated with a lower risk of Alzheimer's. So one study found that a single flu shot was associated with the 17% lower prevalence of Alzheimer's, right? And so this is early days, early research, because we've got to be able to account for a number of other factors in terms of, who are the people who are most likely to get a flu shot, or some really important factors here. But this is really some interesting research that, again, thinking about a global pandemic, thinking about public health strategies and how it relates to Alzheimer's and other dementia. We're keeping that momentum going even in the face of this pandemic, and some of that research landed right at AAIC, which was held just last week. So I'll pivot and turn a corner here. I'm really excited about research that's going on. This is an exciting time. I'm really excited about the hunt for biomarkers. This came up earlier, but just to kind of define this, a biomarker is a biological marker to measure change, right? So in its best case, it's a reliable predictor and indicator of disease and disease progression. For example, cholesterol for heart disease, or glucose for insulin resistance. And and diabetes. So in Alzheimer's disease, this is important because it can be used for diagnostic activities or enrichment, prognostic or predictive, for research specifically. And Dr. Weiss mentioned this during his presentation, but it's a good opportunity for us to use a biomarker to recruit individuals who have a certain level of, let's say, amyloid in their brains, so that when we test a treatment or a lifestyle intervention, we'll know that the people who have or who have a certain amount of amyloid are a part of the clinical trial, right? So the biomarker is really critical and important for so many different reasons. And when we think about the research funding that I mentioned a minute ago and how the Alzheimer's Association works with the NIH, I think of the work of Dr. Bill Klunk, who really came up and discovered the PET amyloid imaging process. So this is the way that we can use imaging procedures to see amyloid in the brain. And Dr. Bill Klunk had a really early idea of using compound B in this for this imaging. And he went to the NIH, and maybe it wasn't just ready for funding from NIH, or maybe they didn't have the money. I don't know what the story was there, but he was able to kind of pivot again and come over to the Alzheimer's Association, and we provided some pilot funding for this idea. And the idea got going, and he was eventually able to use those pilot results to go back to NIH and receive funding for what we know now is, the landmark imaging way for us to see amyloid in the living brain. And that was what Dr. Alois Alzheimer's and Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller could not do, right? So that is a tremendous, I think, advance in our scientific enterprise. And it is, real, example of how diverse funding agencies, the NIH and the Alzheimer's Association, can come together to support the best and brightest researchers to advance our field. And these biomarkers are changing the game. I mentioned amyloid PET imaging. There's tau PET imaging that has been discovered and advanced in our game. We're looking at saliva, biofluid. The hunt for a blood test is so important. There's a global race to uncover and develop blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's and other dementia. We need more research that validates amyloid beta in the blood, but this research is advancing. It's not in your doctor's office today or tomorrow, but it's being, I tell you, pursued in a number of clinical trials, and the support from the NIH and the Alzheimer's Association is really the current, right, that's keeping all of this going. So this is so important. Again, mentioning the Alzheimer's AAIC 2020 just last week. Researchers are really looking at blood biomarkers for tau, right? So again, 3 hallmarks of Alzheimer's: beta amyloid, tau, neurodegeneration. Now we're honing in on research that suggests that a form of tau, which is called p-tau217, is a very specific to Alzheimer's, and when measured in the blood, is highly accurate in distinguishing Alzheimer's from other neurodegenerative disorders. So, while this research is still in early stages, blood tests are easier to administer than Dr. Klunk's PET imaging, and more accessible than those methods for evaluating Alzheimer's. So again, this research is moving, this field is moving forward. I'm so excited because biomarkers will give us such advances in many different areas, and a lot of that discussion landed during AAIC just last week. And it's not only a focus on tau or beta amyloid. We're really committed to diversifying. There's that concept again, diversifying the pipeline, given the resources that we have, so that we're getting researchers involved in a number of different areas, whether it's inflammation, Dr. Weiss mentioned that, or oxidative stress, cellular senescence, vascular related research, where we're really looking at the quality of the oxygen that flows to the brain and how that affects these the neurons and the plaques and tangles that affect those neurons. So the point here is that not only are we honing in on specific areas in the research enterprise, we want to make sure that we continue the spirit of what we did with Dr. Bill Klump, and that is to provide support and funding for new and innovative ideas, because we know that it's this diversity of support is going to help our field reach our ultimate goal, which is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. And one example of that is, again, staying with the blood test example, is a company C29, which received a Part the Cloud funding. I just mentioned the diversity pipeline. Part the Cloud is our funding initiative for diversifying that pipeline. And C29 received a Part the Cloud funding to evaluate the anti-tau antibody, now in phase 2 clinical testing. I'll tell you what that is, but I think Dr. Weiss mentioned that earlier. So, so that initial funding, led to this particular company receiving a $20 million investment from GHR, a Zenith Society member and philanthropic partner of the Alzheimer's Association. So again, moving through the pipeline of receiving support and getting the best and brightest researchers in our space to do this critical work, again, I think gives me great hope that in the very near future, we will have a blood test for Alzheimer's. So I keep your fingers crossed on that. And then, Dr. Weiss mentioned this earlier, but there's always hope. Phase 1 and phase 2, you might think of these as making sure that a certain drug or treatment or device is safe from a dose response perspective. Phase 3 is looking to see if that particular treatment is better than whatever is out on the market at this time. And the take home from here is that in that pipeline, we've got over 300 clinical trials in the Alzheimer's space, and 63 right now in phase 3. And one, as I mentioned just yesterday, mentioned that they submitted their results to FDA for priority review, right? So in that one, aducanumab, as a reminder, it treats the underlying causes of the disease, not the symptoms, but the underlying causes. And it's the first drug to have gone this far in over 10 years, right? So there's hope. And as Dr. Weiss mentioned, we always need participants. That is one of the fundamental issues in this research space. So I'll talk a little bit about how you might be involved with that. Let's shift, I guess, a final gear and talk a little bit about, how, we think that a future of Alzheimer's therapy, and this was covered earlier very extensively, but a future of Alzheimer's therapy will include both lifestyle interventions and medicines, right? Very similar to what we might see with cardiovascular health and heart disease. So the Sprint Mind study, which was the first study to demonstrate a reduction of new cases of cognitive impairment, really gave us some hope around a study that included over 9,000 people over age 50, all-cause dementia risk, and looked at standard versus intensive blood pressure intervention, right? So, physicians and healthcare providers really honing in on getting systolic blood pressure to 120, and saw a reduction in mild cognitive impairment and dementia, right? So this gave us this, I think, this first kind of insight of, well, maybe if we treat the vascular, what's good for the heart may be good for the brain, right? And so there are things that you can do to reduce your risk of MCI, mild cognitive impairment, and dementia, especially regarding cardiovascular disease risk factors. So this is an immediate opportunity, right? Immediate opportunity with life-changing and impact potential. Just last week during AAIC, we had researchers who took a look at BMI and how important that might be, body mass index, and how important that may be for brain health, right? And so researchers who presented some really good work last week saw that there was a 1.8 higher risk for Alzheimer's for those that are overweight, for women that are overweight, and 2.5 times for obese women, right? So again, you're thinking about what's good for the heart, what's good for the brain, how vascular issues may affect the quality of blood that flows to the brain, and how that might, again, impact plaques and tangles, neurons, and the hallmarks of the disease, you're beginning to see processes that all come together, because we know BMI is very closely related to many of the lifestyle factors that we may choose, or the daily habits. That was the term that was used earlier. So how are we able to reduce our risk is so very important. This has led the Alzheimer's Association to conduct our own study, right? It's the U.S. study to protect brain health through lifestyle intervention to reduce risk, called the U.S. Pointer Trial. It's a 2-year, multi-center randomized clinical trial, self-guided and structured lifestyle groups. So, in science, you're looking to compare who gets the intervention and who may not get all of the intervention to see a treatment effect. And there will be 2,000 participants who we're currently recruiting in 5 sites around the United States. And there's one actually in Texas, in Houston, right? And so this is happening right there in your state. And this is going to be, I think, a great opportunity for us to understand how lifestyle factors like physical activity, again, think about that Lancet International Commission on Dementia Prevention, Intervention and Care, which has 12 risk reduction factors, right? So we're taking the great recommendations that they made in 2017 and updated in 2020 to use those to come up with this intervention, if you will, right? And that's going to include physical activity, nutrition, being sure that people eat a Mediterranean diet, all the good stuff that's good for your heart, and what's good for your heart is good for your brain, cognitive stimulation, and then health coaching, which I think is so critical and important. Russell Gaynor mentioned some of this, but if you're like me, I had every intention of getting up this morning and hitting the gym on a Saturday, but I just didn't make it, right? So when you think about lifestyle, one has to think about social support. One has to think about the context of behavior, and that's critical and so important when we think about disparities, right? Because we know that not everyone has the same access to health coaching or social support or quality healthcare, right? So I think Pointer is going to give us so much information about all of what we're hearing in terms of risk reduction and risk factors. It's going to give us a recipe, if you will, that we may be able to go out to communities and provide that resource to communities so they can improve and maintain their brain health and reduce risk for Alzheimer's. So more to come with US Pointer. It's underway. It's recruiting now, and please stay abreast of the findings. You can go to our website, alz.org, to find out more about US Pointer. But I'm so excited because Pointer takes all of the great research that we're hearing about, and it's putting it in the context of translation. I mentioned the symbol for the Alzheimer's Association that you see at the bottom of the slide. This is where it lands. It's the translating the research findings and everything that's discussed during AAIC and getting out into communities so that people can have access to that information through health coaching and intervention. So I'm as a public health guy, I'm so excited to be a part of the Alzheimer's Association at this critical point in this time. And we're not alone, right? So the Fingers trial was mentioned, but we are the foundation and the leader of bringing together a number of researchers around the world that are taking a look at the impact of lifestyle on Alzheimer's and other dementia risk. And this is important because when we think about something like diet, I had a chance to attend the Worldwide Fingers Network meeting just last week. And many of these studies are different in some ways, but all of them are honing in on the importance of lifestyle, right? And so when you think about diet is different from a cultural perspective, right? When you think about diet in this country, in the socio-cultural influences of how people choose to eat, what they choose to eat, right? And how important dinner is and certain foods from a cultural perspective. So in terms of an intervention and thinking about context, diet is going to be so important, and we're able to see slight differences from all around the world. And so this is really, I think, elevating the way that we think about public health approaches for reducing risk for Alzheimer's and other dementia. So again, we're not alone. This is a movement, and this is a momentum that is taking place in many different research labs all around the world. As I mentioned a minute ago, I said African Americans were 2 to 3 times more likely, or Latin Americans were 1.5 to 2 times. It's because we have very low recruitment and retention of African Americans and Latin Americans and Native Americans into Alzheimer's clinical trials. This chart here shows that, with Sprint Mind, there was some diverse inclusion, or YCAP, which is a study out of Columbia University in New York. But for the most part, many of the NIA, National Institute on Aging, funded clinical trials have little to no diverse inclusion, right? And so, this really is incongruent, if you will, with the beginnings of this scientific enterprise, going all the way back to Alois Alzheimer's and Solomon Carter Fuller. The spirit of inclusion is what has really been our starting place. And so we've really got to think critically about how to include diverse populations in the clinical trials. Why is this important? Well, first, it's the right thing to do. I just think that when you have clinical trials that are supported by taxpayers from all over this country, then there should be a standard of diversity and inclusion. But the worst part of this is that we certainly wouldn't want our intervention recipe or the particular drug that is approved by FDA to not be as effective in any one particular population. So we want to know that whatever it is that we're excited about and hopeful for will provide the same level of treatment and response to our loved ones, no matter their race, ethnic status, or geographic status. So we want to be as diverse and inclusive as possible. Ways, I think, to think about recruitment and retention. Certainly, we need resources. This was a topic that was discussed during AAIC 2020 just last week. Resources so that researchers can evaluate their strategies for recruitment, training or participatory engagement, knowing that you think about a clinical trial, you've got to engage community groups to really help our communities understand the importance of something like a PET amyloid scan, right? And why one would want to have one conducted on them or their loved one in a clinical trial. So there's a certain awareness component here that's so important. And then compliance and accountabilities. And I think, what we're doing with the Alzheimer's Association is looking at all of the researchers that we fund, and we're trying to understand, what some of the barriers are for diverse recruitment and retention. So this is an important area from a health disparities perspective, because we want to make sure that the knowledge that we're gaining, that we're pursuing, would be applicable and relevant to all populations in the United States. And then another great resource here is our own TrialMatch, right? So it has over 350,000 users, and over 300 clinical studies are listed there in 500 locations all over the country. So it's it's almost like the dating match service, right? Well, where the outcome here is not a nice dinner date at a restaurant, but it's an opportunity to be a part of a clinical trial, which I think is probably way more important. So if you get a chance, go to our website, alz.org/TrialMatch. And if you're looking to participate in a clinical trial, or if you have a loved one that might be eligible, I tell you that there's important gains of participating in a clinical trial, because you get a chance to be under a doctor's care. I think that's critical and so important, and it gives you time to plan, right? So being a part of a clinical trial, I think, is a heroic. It's as important as the work that our caregivers are doing, because we know that it's adding to what we'll learn for future generations. So take a look at TrialMatch and see if you're eligible or your loved one is eligible for a clinical trial. We need participants to help advance this science. So in summary, the Alzheimer's Association, I hope I've impressed upon you that the Alzheimer's Association is a global leader for Alzheimer's and dementia science. I'm so thrilled and excited to be a part of the association. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary, and I couldn't be more happy with my decision to join this team. And there's so much work to do. It's an exciting time in research. New tools, I mentioned, biomarkers, looking for blood tests or diagnosis, the growing diversity, if you will, again, of therapies, the ways that we're thinking about this, not only trying to detect and decrease amyloid in the brain, but there's just so many different ways that we're thinking about this from a lifestyle perspective or tools that are under investigation. This is just a critical time where diversity is a guiding principle. But we need resources and innovation, I think, for diverse participation, and I think that is going to be a new frontier for our diverse principle, is to be sure that we're including participants from many different contexts and backgrounds, and that we're providing resources to researchers, that come from many diverse places, so they can contribute to our science. So we've got work to do in the diversity principle, but this is an exciting time because new research is leading to a future of therapy that combines, again, drugs and modifiable risk factor interventions. And to stay abreast of that, stay close to our U.S. Pointer trial, which I think is going to be landmark in giving us information about the recipe for risk reduction from an intervention perspective. And why is all of this important? I tell you, again, I mentioned, I love a great scientific talk, and I love a great publication in a high impact journal. But what we are most concerned about is people's lives. So if we develop a treatment by 2025 that, let's just say, delays the onset of Alzheimer's by just 5 years, 5.7 million people who are expected to develop Alzheimer's in 2050 would not. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what I'm passionate about, is because of the way that we translate the research into information and resources that people can use so that we can save lives. And that's what we're so excited about, the research in public health. You can stay abreast of a number of our activities with our Science Hub app. Everything, I tell you, in this new virtual reality, we're learning how to connect and stay connected using applications. I have my phone here, just right around here, and I have the Science Hub downloaded. And I tell you, I go there daily because our communication staff is always updating that with new information. That's how I found out about the aducanumab and FDA's decision to review it, right there on the Science Hub app. So, I've got an iPhone. I don't know what kind of phone you have, but in whatever the way that you download apps, whether it's Google Play or the App Store, take a look. It's free to download, and I tell you, there's so much great information that you can obtain from being abreast of what's going on with the Science Hub app. And I'll end, I tell you, again, with I think where I started, and this is what really excites me, and the champions of diversity, not only from an inclusion perspective. I tell you, Dr. Alois Alzheimer's had to be a great scientist and man, to include at that time, right, in 1906, to include Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller in his work, the first African-American psychiatrist, and their diverse perspectives, thinking about how what's going on in the brain can impact biology. I think that is the start and foundation of our scientific enterprise, and we've got to be sure that we're paying very close attention to what they started, which is a way of allowing diverse participation and perspectives. And I am so passionate about helping to do that. So you can, again, stay abreast of. You can probably find everything that I've discussed on our website, alz.org, or call my colleagues who are available every day, all day, 365 days a year at 800-272-3900. And Jenny, I look forward to taking a few questions. This was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. I love that last slide, and I hope that all of our PowerPoint presentations that just have the picture of Dr. Alzheimer, that we can swap that out and make sure that we have that included with the Dr. Fuller picture as well, because that's so important. So the comments have absolutely rolled in about just how incredibly thankful everyone is for your presentation, and one of our volunteer committee members said, can you just please, when the pandemic is over, plan to visit San Antonio, because it's excellent to hear from you, and we'd love to. You were set, you were flying in March with us, but hopefully you will in the future come and visit our city sometime soon.
Absolutely, yeah. This was the trip. I think, Jenny, I was planning to come there, and then that's when the decisions were made to, again, reduce risk for COVID, and everyone was kind of sent home. So I look forward to being there, Jenny. I appreciate the opportunity to engage, virtually, but there's nothing like being able to shake hands and to talk to caregivers and to talk to our staff there that are working in community. So as soon as this, whatever our new normal will look like in the future, please invite me to come back, because I'll be there.
You absolutely. One of the questions was actually about
aducanumab. Yes.
Aducanumab.
Yes.
Do they show what any of the side effects? I mean, are we too soon to even get into that? But that was one of the questions that came up about the excitement of that.
Yeah. Well, so what we'll do, Jenny, I think is, lean on FDA for a rigorous, review of some of those side effects. But when you think about, the phases of clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2 are really honing in on safety. So the fact that it made it through those phases of review, and the FDA has accepted, the application for final review, or further review, and it's the priority review, I think gives me some hope that the safety part of this is being reviewed. So we'll all of us will keep our eyes glued to the screen, and we're looking to hear from FDA. But I think it's exciting to know, and we have hope, because this is the first treatment that has gone this far that treats the underlying causes of the disease in over 10 years. So it's very hopeful and exciting.
Finally, it's about time. I can say the word hope has come up repeatedly during your presentation. And also just, I love how you talk so much about AAIC, the International Conference of the Alzheimer's Association, and that we want everyone to know that, like you said, that Science Hub, that's free, that's open to the public. And we want everyone to know that come to the Alzheimer's Association for information about credible evidence and research, because that's so important. Another question that came in was for treatment, how important is it to identify the specific type of dementia that it is?
I think that's a really good question that we're understanding more and more about, for example, vascular dementia, and, thinking about disparities, right? So some of the vascular outcomes that we know in midlife, like diabetes or hypertension, there are extreme disparities where African Americans and Latin Americans are disproportionately affected. So what we want to do is continue to support research that will allow us to distinguish and disentangle between some of the processes that could be different for different populations, right? So that's why it's so important, I think, for us to continue to advocate for resources so that the NIA can support research in that area, that we can continue to support research in our own regard as it pertains to this. Because it's a great question, because as we get to a point of intervention, right, that recipe with pointer, or thinking about maybe a treatment, we want to make sure that we're being as precise, or people talk about precision medicine, but that treatment is as precise and specific and targeted, so that we can improve the lives of people who are affected by this devastating disease.
Are there research projects that you are aware of that specifically focus on younger onset Alzheimer's and dementia?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We find quite a few trials that are looking at taking that population that Dr. Weiss mentioned, those that have a genetic risk, and following them over time with novel treatments and therapies. I tell you, there's a young researcher that we are supporting, Dr. Megan Zulsdorf, who's looking at something called the weathering hypothesis, which really shows that she's proposing that there could be younger onset populations that experience stress over the life course that may accelerate risk over time, right? So again, I think there are different ways of looking at this, and we're supporting many clinical trials that are honing in and recruiting this particular population. So more research, more to come. Stay abreast with the Science Hub app or with our website, because there's new information coming in almost weekly around some of the methods in these research projects or the results.
Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I wish that we could just keep you on for the rest of the day, but we better wrap up just so we can take a quick break, and we'll follow that with Dr. Lozano. Dr. Hill, thank you very, very much for joining us today via this virtual Zoom. We greatly appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, and thanks everyone for participating. Thanks for the questions in the chat, and I hope you have continue to have a great conference, great meeting today, and take good care. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too. And everyone, I know we're a few minutes behind. We have such good information. But we need to let's take an intermission. We'll get everything set up for Dr. Yvonne Lozano, another excellent presenter. So we will be back shortly. Thank you.
My father passed away. I needed help with my mother. I needed to put her in a new facility. Home to home for seniors is different because they're very caring. Home to home for seniors has taken some of that burden off of my shoulders. I really trust them. And you will too.
Trust the families that trust us. Call Home to Home for Seniors today or find us online.
I'm an advocate for my mother.
I am an advocate because my father lost his voice.
I'm an advocate for my grandma.
I'm an advocate because I'm a caregiver for my grandfather.
I realized 10 years ago that I needed to change the course of this disease in history. And the only way I was really going to do that was to get involved and advocate for more research funding at a national level.
There are so many of us who are impacted by this, and the louder we are in Washington, the more we're going to be heard.
Being a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or similar dementia can place an incredible strain on your emotional and physical well-being. The painful loss you feel is made worse when you realize your loved one can no longer be left at home alone. Caregivers consistently find themselves with less time to manage their household, hold down a job, or even take care of their own needs. Some caregivers are fortunate enough to have a family member to help out, but for others, there is simply no one to help them.
I'm a caregiver for my husband. We've been married 58 years, and the last 6 years he has developed dementia. And I just take one day at a time, and whatever the good Lord gives me I just deal with it.
I'm a caregiver to my mom, Luisa Rodriguez. My brother and I both caregivers for her. My mom lives here with my brother in San Antonio, and I live in Germany. The biggest change I've seen with caring for somebody with Alzheimer's is you have to revolve your schedule around them. And I don't have children of my own, but for my friends that have children and my coworkers that have children, I would think it's the same experience. That you have to put, a lot of times, your own needs secondary to their needs.
Life can become very challenging for a caregiver, and studies have shown that depression and health problems are common in those caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia. This is why Meals on Wheels San Antonio is proud to provide Grace Place Alzheimer's Activity Center, San Antonio's only licensed adult day activity center specializing in dementia and Alzheimer's. Our goal is to alleviate stress by providing an affordable and safe environment so that families impacted by this disease can continue living a normal life. At Grace Place, your loved one can participate in stimulating activities throughout the day that focus on their unique needs and abilities under the supervision of friendly certified staff and nurses. Adults with Alzheimer's spend the day interacting with other seniors, which can lead to positive changes in the lives of our clients.
I think they need the routine challenges every day. I think it's great, and they have a lot of programs there. And just the other day, they had a church come by with sing along, and all the clients singing. It's just wonderful, the programs that they have to encourage the people to participate.
From my point, in my brother's point of view, we know she has a good place to go to during the day. She's not sitting at home by herself. She's got people she can interact with. And I've seen such a dramatic improvement. She's positive, she's happy. Of course, that reflects back on us. The better she's doing, the easier it is for us. Taking her to Grace Place gives you the sense to be able to catch your breath. Yeah, it is a little bit of, it is a relief to know that, okay, I don't have to worry about things right now. I can concentrate on work. I can concentrate on the other things I need to do. And she's in a good facility. She's in a good place. You can recharge. You can kind of pull back a little bit, catch your breath, and then be able to go back and say, okay, regroup, and then move forward again.
After I take him to Grace Place, I know that he's being taken care of. I can go do what I want to do. I have no worries about when I leave him at Grace Place. And when I pick him up, he's just, the caregivers are really super. I mean, I can't talk enough good about Grace Place and the caregivers.
At the end of the day, she's happy. She's positive. She's had a good day. She's done activities during the day. She's done some exercises. She's talked to other people. She's listened to music. She's played games. And you can see that spark is back in their eyes. Now she has a feeling of belonging someplace. Maybe not so much physical, but it's definitely mental and definitely spiritual. Those are the positive changes that I've seen.
Didn't want to take him because I couldn't let him go. And I cried the first time I took him. It's just like taking your child to school. But now I can take him and be at peace. You know, there are wonderful people there. And they greet him all the time. The caregivers are really, the whole staff has been wonderful.
Grace Place Alzheimer's Activity Centers provides relief for caregivers. If you're a caregiver living in or near the San Antonio area, know that Grace Place is here for you and your loved ones. For more information, please visit gracefacesa.org.
Hi everybody, my name is Rebecca and I'm the co-chair for the 2020 Long Stay Committee, and I'm super excited to announce that I'm going to be your 2021 chairperson. My family and I started working with the Long Stay Committee after we lost my grandmother to this horrible disease. The thing I like best about the Long Stay is it can be anything you want. Anything you can think of can become a fundraiser, a bake sale, a car wash, a virtual 5K. You can do great things to help this Long Stay Committee. My question is, will you join us next season?
Hi, my name is Alex Benetti. I'm a volunteer and chair for the Longest Day Committee. My favorite thing about being part of this group is knowing that every dollar raised helps fight this disease from all angles. We're not only helping to fund groundbreaking research and to shape public policy, we're also supporting our local communities through programming, awareness, and advocacy. This disease hits close to home for my family, and the research tells us if you have a brain, you're at risk too. We're all in this together. I hope you'll consider joining me in the fight against Alzheimer's.
Grace Notes Community Choir would like to thank you veterans for your service. God bless America.
thank Dr. Carl Hill. My goodness, that was fantastic. That was I don't know about everybody else, but my brain is overloaded with information. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that 3 more times.